The sky was heavy that night. Gray clouds drifted over the streetlights, turning Christmas Eve into something colder. I carried the casserole dish in both hands, steam fogging the foil. It smelled of onions, butter, and cream. The same recipe my mother made every year. I thought Emily would smile when she saw it. I thought she would let me in just like every Christmas before. Instead, she opened the door only halfway. Her face was tight, her jaw set like stone. "Mom," she said. Her voice didn't sound like Christmas. It sounded like judgment. I shifted the dish in my hands. "Merry Christmas, honey." I brought the casserole. Her children peeked out from behind her legs. Two small faces, wide eyes full of confusion. They didn't speak. They didn't smile. They just looked at me, waiting. "You shouldn't have come," Emily whispered, then louder so the family inside could hear. "You never helped me, Mom. You never did." The words fell sharp. Sharp enough that I almost dropped the casserole. Inside the house, I heard laughter. Forks clinked against plates. A television hummed. The celebration went on without me. I tried to swallow. My mouth was dry. "I don't understand," I said softly. "I worked. I gave you—" She cut me off. "Work doesn't mean help. You were never there. Not when I needed you." Her voice cracked, but her eyes stayed hard. She pushed the door closer to shut. Behind her, I saw the dining room. The ham glistened on the table. Candles flickered. Her husband raised his glass with her in-laws. The chair at the end of the table was empty. It was mine. Emily stepped fully into the doorway now. She blocked me with her body. Her hand rested on the knob, ready to push me back onto the porch. "Go home, Mom," she said. "This isn't your night." The neighbors across the street stood on their porch, smoking. I felt their eyes on me. I felt their whispers waiting for morning. She wasn't even invited. Her daughter sent her away. The casserole burned my palms. I wanted to scream. I wanted to remind Emily of the nights I stayed up while she coughed with fever, the jobs I worked, the money I sent when her marriage nearly collapsed. But nothing came out. Silence was safer than begging. So I turned. Step by step, I walked down her front path. The cold air stung my cheeks. The foil rattled in the wind. The laughter inside grew louder, like the house itself was mocking me. The door shut with a clean click. No one followed. No one stopped me. I reached my car and set the casserole on the passenger seat. Steam clouded the windows. It filled the space with a smell that now made me sick. For a long moment, I sat there staring at her front porch. The wreath glowed under the porch light. Her family's shadows moved across the curtains. I was outside. They were inside. And Emily had drawn the line clear as glass. I gripped the steering wheel. My knuckles whitened. Her words replayed again and again. "You never helped me. You never helped. You never." I shut my eyes, but the sound stayed. It filled my head like a bell that would not stop ringing. Neighbors still watched. I started the engine. The hum drowned some of it out, but not enough. I drove. The streets were empty, lined with Christmas lights strung across porches. Every house glowed with warmth. Every house except mine. When I pulled into my driveway, the loneliness hit harder. No cars, no guests, no laughter, only silence. I carried the casserole inside, set it on the counter, pulled the foil back. The steam curled up, then faded, just like the welcome I thought I had. I sat at the kitchen table. The chair across from me was empty. So was the one beside it. The whole house felt hollow. I pressed my hands to my face. Her words echoed again. Never helped. Never. Never. Tears came hot, stinging, but I wiped them away fast. I would not cry for her tonight. Not when she had already taken everything. Instead, I sat in silence. I let the anger grow inside me, slow but steady. Anger that warmed me more than the casserole ever could. She thought I never helped. She thought I was weak. She thought she could erase me. But Christmas Eve was only the beginning. I had spent my whole life giving her power. Now it was time to take some back. And I knew exactly where to start. The car ride home stayed in my bones. The silence was heavy. Her words were heavier. I parked in the driveway. The engine ticked as it cooled. For a long time I couldn't move. Inside the house, everything was too quiet. The lights I had strung along the banister twinkled, but they mocked me. They were shining for no one. I set the casserole down on the counter. It no longer steamed. The foil was damp. The smell that once meant comfort now felt sour. I sat at the table and stared at the wall. Memories started rolling in one by one. Her fever when she was 7. The nights I rocked her in the old armchair, whispering lullabies, begging the fever to break. She never remembered that. Her braces at 12. The dentist bills I paid in full even when rent was late. She never remembered that. Her college deposit. The envelope of cash I gave her working double shifts at the diner. She never remembered that either. All she remembered was the absence. The days I couldn't attend every school recital. The nights I was too tired to help with every homework problem. She took the cracks in my presence and painted them as the whole picture. I leaned back. The chair creaked. My hands trembled. I wanted to believe she had only spoken in anger, that maybe wine had loosened her tongue. But no. Her eyes were too steady. Her words were too sharp. She had planned it, and she had chosen Christmas Eve for the execution. I thought of the neighbors, the way their cigarettes glowed on the porch, the way their whispers would spread in the morning. Her daughter wouldn't even let her in. Imagine that. Must be something she did. The shame burned hotter than any oven. I felt stripped bare, like every sacrifice had been invisible to everyone. Not just Emily, everyone. I walked to the window, pulled the curtain back. Across the street, the house glowed with laughter. Families clinked glasses, opened presents, hugged one another. Their joy pierced me like needles. I whispered to myself, "She thinks I never helped." The words tasted bitter. I repeated them softer. "She thinks I never helped." Something stirred in me then. Not just sadness, not just anger. It was something sharper, something I had not felt in years. I realized how much of my life had been spent holding her up, protecting her image, shielding her mistakes from the world, and now she had erased me. I walked to the hall closet, opened it slowly. The smell of mothballs drifted out. Inside, stacked on the floor, was a box. A plain tin box, dented old but heavy. I dragged it out. My hands shook as I lifted the lid. Inside were receipts, bills, bank slips, notes in Emily's handwriting. "Mom, please don't tell anyone. Mom, can you cover this just once, Mom? I'll pay you back." I traced the letters with my finger. Proof. Years of proof. She thought I never helped. But I had helped more than anyone. I had been her silent safety net. And she had turned my silence into nothingness. I stacked the papers on the table. Page after page. Years of sacrifice laid bare. A memory hit me like a hammer. The night she was 19. She called me from the police station begging me to come, begging me not to tell her father. I drove across town in the rain, paid the fine, and took her home. She cried in the passenger seat. She swore she'd never forget, but she did. Now she claimed I had never helped. I pressed my hands flat on the table. The wood was cold under my palms. My breath came fast, almost ragged. For the first time that night, I didn't feel weak. I didn't feel erased. I felt awake. Maybe she had shut the door on me. Maybe she thought the story was finished. But I still had pages she didn't expect. I looked again at the box, at the letters, at the receipts, at the secrets she once begged me to hide. She thought I would stay silent. She thought I would keep protecting her. But silence was what had gotten me here. Silence was what let her rewrite history. Not anymore. I stood up. The house felt less hollow now. The anger gave it shape. The proof gave it weight. I turned off the kitchen light. The room sank into shadows. The casserole sat untouched. But my mind was no longer empty. Christmas Eve was over. But something else had begun. The sun rose cold the next morning. Snow had not fallen, but frost spread across the lawns. I pulled the curtains back and stared at the quiet street. Still, I felt eyes on me. The casserole dish sat on the counter. I hadn't touched it. The smell clung to the air like shame. I thought about throwing it out, but I didn't. Not yet. I made coffee, though I wasn't hungry. The bitterness filled the room. I held the mug with both hands, warming my fingers. But my chest stayed frozen. By mid-morning, I stepped outside. The air bit my cheeks. Across the street, 2 neighbors stood by their mailbox. They stopped talking when they saw me. Then one leaned close to the other, whispering. Both looked away too fast. I knew what they were saying. They had seen me walk away last night. They had heard the door slam. They had seen the casserole in my hands, and they would tell everyone. My throat tightened. I tried to hold my chin high, but my heart pounded. I could almost hear their words. She showed up uninvited. Her own daughter told her off. Can you imagine? The shame burned hotter than the coffee. I felt smaller than I had in years, like I was shrinking piece by piece. I turned back inside, closed the door. Leaning against it, I pressed my palms flat to the wood, breathing heavy, trying to steady myself. On the fridge, photos stared back at me. Emily at 10 holding her spelling bee trophy, Emily at 16 grinning beside her first car, Emily at 22 tossing her graduation cap. I was there for every one of those moments, but none of it mattered now. She had rewritten me, and now the neighbors believed her story. I paced the kitchen. The floor creaked under each step. Memories came back sharp and fast. Emily at 17. I covered for her when she skipped school. I told the principal she was sick. I sat by her bed all day making sure she didn't get caught. Emily at 20. She called me crying because her boyfriend had left her stranded. I drove across town in the middle of the night to pick her up. She clung to me like a child again. Emily at 25. The hospital bill she couldn't pay. I wrote the check. She promised she would never forget, but she did forget. She forgot everything. And now she made me the villain. I sat at the table clutching the coffee mug. The proof sat only a room away in that tin box. Letters, receipts, bank slips, evidence of all the times I caught her when she was falling. But the neighbors didn't know. The family didn't know. Only Emily knew, and she had buried it. The thought twisted in me. The shame turned to something else, something darker, something hotter. Maybe I couldn't stop the whispers this week. Maybe the neighbors would talk. But one day they would know the truth. Not just them, everyone. I rose from the table. My hands no longer trembled. The humiliation still stung, but underneath it, anger burned steady, like coals refusing to die. I walked to the closet, opened the box again. The papers waited. Her handwriting stared back at me. Mom, please don't tell. Mom, just this once. Every slip of paper was a weapon. Every line was proof that I had been there, proof that she had lied. I closed the box carefully. Not tonight, not tomorrow, but soon. I would remind Emily of the mother she thought she could erase. Outside, the neighbors laughed, their voices faint in the wind. I didn't flinch this time. Let them talk. Let them guess. Soon, they would see more than whispers. Soon, they would see the truth. And Emily would feel what it meant to be shut out. The house was too quiet that night. Even the refrigerator hum felt sharp, like it was mocking me. I turned on the lamp in the living room. Its yellow glow spread over the carpet. I sat there staring at nothing. Emily's words would not leave me. You never helped me. They repeated in my mind over and over like a cruel chant. I pressed my palms to my ears, but the memory still rang inside. I stood suddenly. My body moved before I could stop it. I walked to the hallway closet, the same closet I had avoided for years. I pulled the door open. At the bottom sat the tin box, dented, old, but heavy with years. I dragged it out, the metal scraping the floor. My hands shook as I carried it to the table. I set it down gently as if the weight might break the wood. For a moment I just stared. That box held my silence. That box held my life as a mother. Every sacrifice I made, every secret I kept. I unlatched the lid. The metal clicked open. Inside, the papers waited. Receipts curled with age. Bank slips faded with time. Notes scrawled in Emily's handwriting rushed and desperate. Mom, I'm short on rent. Please. Mom, can you cover my car insurance this month? Mom, please don't tell Dad. I picked up one note. The ink had smeared from tears, hers or mine. I held it between my fingers. Proof. Proof that I had been there. Proof she had erased. I pulled out another paper. A hospital bill. Emily had been 25. She broke her wrist after a fall. She called me panicked, begging me to handle it. I did. I wrote the check. I told her she would pay me back someday. She never did. I laid the bill on the table, placed the note beside it. The evidence grew piece by piece. Next came a receipt from the university bursar's office, her tuition deposit. I worked double shifts for months to scrape that money together. I gave her the envelope on a warm spring day. She cried and hugged me. She swore she'd never forget, but she had. I stacked the papers neatly, one on top of the other, a tower of forgotten sacrifices. My eyes burned, but I held back tears. Tears would not help me now. What I needed was strength. What I needed was memory. My memory, not hers. I reached deeper into the box. My fingers brushed against the leather spine of an old notebook. I pulled it out slowly. It was one of my journals. I flipped it open. The handwriting was mine. The pages were filled with nights I thought I would break. Nights I stayed awake waiting for Emily to come home safe. Nights I covered for her. Nights I carried the weight of her choices. One entry stopped me cold. June 14th. Emily was arrested for shoplifting. She begged me not to tell her father. I drove to the station, paid the fine. She promised she learned her lesson. I stayed quiet. My hands trembled as I read the words. The memory rushed back, her face streaked with mascara, her hands clutching mine. Please, Mom, don't tell anyone. And I didn't. Not even her father. I carried it alone. I closed the journal and pressed it to my chest. She thought I never helped, but I had saved her reputation more times than she would admit. I had been the shield she spat on. I placed the journal on the table beside the stack of papers. The pile looked taller now, like a mountain of truth that had been buried too long. I sat back in the chair. The lamp glowed warm against the evidence. For the first time since Christmas Eve, I felt something new. Not humiliation, not shame. Power. Quiet, steady power. The box was no longer just a container of memories. It was a weapon I had never thought I would use. But Emily had forced my hand. I whispered to the empty room. She thinks I never helped. She thinks I was never there. I looked at the papers. The proof answered back. She is wrong. I reached for the lid, closed the box carefully. The click of metal echoed like a promise. I slid the box back toward the closet. Not hidden this time, not forgotten. It stayed near waiting. I sat again in silence, but this silence felt different. It was no longer hollow. It was no longer heavy with shame. It was filled with purpose. Emily had opened a door she could not close. She thought she had silenced me forever, but she had given me something instead, a reason. Christmas Eve had taken my dignity, but this box gave me back my strength, and I would use it. I didn't know how yet, but I would. The night stretched long. I sat at the table staring at the closed box. The lamp flickered. The air felt charged as if the house itself knew. Change was coming. I whispered once more softly, but steady. She thinks I never helped. Then I smiled. Now she will learn what it feels like when I don't. The phone rang 3 days later. Its shrill tone cut through the quiet house. I stared at the caller ID. Emily. For a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail, but I answered. Hello? Her voice was rushed, tight. Mom, can you watch the kids tonight just for a few hours? Mike's parents can't, and I really need someone. I sat very still. Her words floated through the receiver like nothing had happened, as if Christmas Eve had never come, as if she hadn't shut me out. My chest tightened. I heard the children in the background, their laughter, their small voices. It twisted at me sharp and soft at the same time. I closed my eyes. No, I said. Silence on the other end. I could almost see her face startled. What do you mean, no? You're always... I can't... I cut her off. Simple. Final. She inhaled sharply. You can't or you won't. I let the pause stretch. My lips curved into a smile she couldn't see. I won't. The silence on the line thickened. Her children chattered in the background, unaware of the shift happening. Finally, she spoke again. Her voice was cold now. Fine. The call ended. The line went dead. I sat with the phone still pressed to my ear. The click echoed in me like a victory, small but sharp. For years I had answered every call, every plea, every crisis. I had never said no. Until now. I set the phone down on the table. The tin box sat nearby. I glanced at it as if it had given me strength. Maybe it had. The house felt different in that moment. Lighter. Not empty, but mine. I poured myself a glass of water and drank slowly. Each swallow felt steady, like I was learning to breathe again. That night I slept without dreams. For the first time in a long time, my rest was unbroken. The next morning, I went about my day calmly. I swept the floor, watered the plants, folded laundry, ordinary tasks, but each felt purposeful, like I was reclaiming the hours that had always belonged to me. By afternoon, the phone buzzed again. A text this time, from Emily. Thanks for nothing. No pleas, no explanation. Just accusation, blunt and childish. I didn't reply. My fingers itched to type back to remind her of all the years I had given. But silence spoke louder, so I left the message unread. Hours later, another text. Don't think this changes anything. I laughed out loud. The sound startled me. It had been years since laughter felt real in my throat. But it came. Sharp, short, bitter. Because everything had already changed. The balance was shifting. And she knew it. That evening I sat at the table with a notebook. Not one of the old journals. A new one. A clean page. I wrote the date at the top. Then I wrote day 1. I said no. My hand shook slightly, but I smiled at the words. It was a record of something Emily had never expected. A record of my silence becoming power. I closed the notebook and placed it beside the tin box. The past and the present sitting together. What I had done for her. What I was now refusing to do. The phone stayed quiet for the rest of the night. I wondered if she had managed to find someone else. Her husband, a neighbor, anyone. For once it wasn't my problem. I leaned back in my chair. The lamp glowed softly. The shadows of the house stretched long, and for the first time I didn't feel like I was the one left out. She was. She had shut me out of her house. Now I had shut her out of mine. And this was only the beginning. A week passed before I heard the ripple. It came through a neighbor, not Emily. She stopped me by the mailbox. Her scarf was pulled tight, her breath white in the cold. Your grandkids, she said softly, as if she were sharing a secret. They were asking why you weren't at Christmas dinner. The words struck me harder than Emily's door had. For a moment I couldn't answer. I just nodded, clutching my mail too tightly. That night I sat at the table again. The tin box sat in the corner untouched. But the question of children's voices filled the room. Why wasn't Grandma there? I imagined their faces. Small, confused, maybe even hurt. They didn't understand the rift. They couldn't. The thought twisted at me. Not guilt, not regret, but something sharper. Because I knew Emily would have to answer them, and there was no easy lie for a child. I poured myself tea, watched the steam rise. I thought of the way children notice things adults ignore. They see silence. They feel absence. They ask the questions no one else dares. Emily could tell her in-laws whatever she wanted. She could spin stories for neighbors. But her own children, they would not be silenced. The next morning, I went to the grocery store. In the bread aisle, I saw one of the kids' teachers. She smiled politely. Then she said, "They miss you. They talk about you in class." My heart fluttered, not with sadness, but with a strange satisfaction. The cracks were spreading. Emily's version of the truth was already fraying. At home, I opened my new notebook. I wrote day 8. The children asked. I underlined the words twice, because this wasn't just silence anymore. This was pressure. Not from me, but from the very people Emily couldn't control. I pictured her at breakfast, the children tugging at her sleeve. Why wasn't Grandma there? Her forced smile, her excuses, her lies, and the silence that followed. The silence children never forget. That evening I sat by the window. The lights across the street glowed warm. Families gathered again, celebrating the last days of the year. I didn't feel jealousy this time. I felt patience, because I knew time was working in my favor. Children never stop asking. And sooner or later, Emily would run out of answers. The phone buzzed late that night. A message from Emily. Short. Don't talk to the kids about Christmas. I'll handle it. I laughed softly. I hadn't said a word to them. I didn't have to. They had spoken on their own. I typed nothing back. Silence again, because silence was louder than anything I could write. Before bed, I opened the tin box once more, flipped through the notes, the receipts, the journal pages. Not to plan, not yet, just to remind myself that I had always been there, that the truth waited patient ready. I closed the lid. The metal click was softer this time. Not a threat. A promise. Emily had thought she shut me out, but now her own children were pulling me back in, not because I begged, not because I forced, but because truth lives in questions children ask, and Emily would have to answer them, soon. The church bell rang clear that Sunday. Cold air wrapped around the steeple. I walked up the steps slowly, holding my coat tight across my chest. It had been weeks since Christmas Eve, but the memory still clung like frost. The neighbors' whispers, Emily's words at the door, the casserole cooling in the car. Inside, the pews filled quickly, families bundled in winter coats, children fidgeting with hymn books. The smell of old wood and candle wax filled the air. I found a seat near the back, 2 pews behind Emily. Her children sat neatly beside her, their legs swinging. Her husband leaned forward, whispering something, but Emily kept glancing back. Her eyes met mine once, then darted away. The service began. Voices rose together, singing a hymn about peace and unity. I mouthed the words, but no sound left me. All I could hear was the pulse in my ears. During the sermon, the pastor spoke of forgiveness, of how families must hold one another in times of trial. Heads nodded, hands folded. I saw Emily stiffen, her shoulders locked like stone. After the final prayer, people began to shuffle out. I stayed seated, waited, watched. Whispers started before the doors opened. A woman leaned close to her husband. She and Emily don't sit together anymore. Another voice nearby. I thought they were inseparable. Emily's face flushed. She pulled her children close, hurrying them toward the exit. But she couldn't outrun the murmurs. They followed her soft but sharp. I stood slowly. My coat rustled. I moved toward the aisle. An older friend of mine, one who had known Emily since childhood, stopped me. She touched my arm gently. "I don't understand," she whispered. "You raised that girl alone. You carried her." Her eyes flicked toward Emily's retreating figure. "What happened?" I said nothing. I only smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hides storms. Then I walked past, silent, steady. The whispers grew behind me as I stepped outside. Cold air struck my cheeks, but I didn't shiver. I felt warm, not with love, with vindication. Emily had thought she erased me, but the church saw me. The community remembered, and they were starting to question her story. At home, I wrote in my notebook. Day 15. The church whispered. She could not silence them. I underlined it twice. The words glowed against the page. I looked toward the closet. The tin box sat hidden, but close, waiting, always waiting. I didn't need to open it tonight. I didn't need to show them yet. For now, silence was enough. My absence was enough. The whispers did the work for me, and Emily's shoulders stiff in that pew told me the truth. She was breaking, not with my voice, not with my hand, with the silence she thought she wanted. The house was quiet again. Winter air pressed against the windows, making them rattle. I lit a single lamp and sat at the table. The tin box waited in the closet, but tonight I wanted something deeper. I walked down the hall to my bedroom, opened the bottom drawer of the dresser. There, under folded sweaters, lay the stack of journals, leather covers cracked with age, spines bent from years of use. I pulled one free. The pages smelled of dust and ink. My handwriting filled each line tight and careful. I had written them when I thought no one would ever listen. When silence was the only place I could speak. I opened to a random page. August 12th. Emily stayed out until 2. I waited by the window, praying headlights would appear. When she came home, she smelled of smoke. She begged me not to tell her father. I promised I wouldn't. I touched the words with my finger. The memory returned sharp as glass. Her face flushed mascara, streaked hands trembling. She had cried into my lap that night, and I had held her, protected her. Another page. March 3rd. Emily called from the police station. Shoplifting. She was 19. I drove in the rain, paid the fine. She promised she would change. She swore she'd never forget this night, but she had forgotten, or she pretended to. I flipped faster page after page. Hospital visits, late-night phone calls. Bills slipped into my hands, secrets whispered in the dark. All the moments I carried for her. My chest tightened, not with shame this time, with temptation. What if I let others read these words? What if her in-laws saw the pages? What if the community that whispered already could see the truth laid bare? Her image would crumble. Her lies would wither. I closed the journal quickly, pressing it shut. My breath came fast. Too fast. The thought scared me, because these journals were not just paper. They were my blood, my tears, my years. And if I used them, I couldn't take it back. Once words leave the page, they never return. I set the journal on the table, sat staring at it. The lamplight flickered over the cover. It looked harmless, but I knew it wasn't. I whispered to the empty room, "She thinks I never helped." The journal answered back in silence, but its weight said otherwise. My fingers itched to grab another. So I did. Flipped it open. December 21st. Emily broke down on the phone. She said she couldn't go on. I drove all night to bring her home. I stayed with her until morning. She promised she would always be grateful. I shut the book harder this time. The sound echoed. My chest ached. I couldn't decide if the ache was sorrow or anger. Maybe both. I stacked the journals in front of me. 1, 2, 3. A tower of truth. Every lie she told balanced on top of these pages. I sat back, pressing my hands flat to the table. I told myself I wouldn't use them, that I was only remembering. But the thought wouldn't leave. The temptation lingered sharp and steady. I picked up my new notebook, wrote day 22, found the journals. They hold everything. She has forgotten. I have not. I stared at the words. My pen hovered, waiting for more. Finally, I added, "Not yet, but maybe soon." I closed the notebook, closed the journals, stacked them neatly, returned them to the drawer, but my hands lingered on the leather spines. I almost wanted to keep them close like the tin box, close enough to touch. When I turned off the lamp, the room sank into darkness, but the thought glowed inside me. Temptation, a weapon waiting, a truth too sharp to stay hidden forever. The invitation came from a neighbor. Nothing fancy, just a winter potluck away to brighten January's gray. I almost said no, but something in me whispered yes. I carried a small dish, nothing special, and walked through the snow-dusted yard. The house glowed with warm lights. Inside, people laughed, coats piled high on chairs, children running across the floor. Emily was there. Of course she was. Her husband stood beside her, drink in hand. Her children clung to her legs. Her smile looked polished, too polished, like a mask. I kept my distance at first, chatted with an old friend, took a small plate of food. But the whispers started soon enough. Someone asked about Christmas. I didn't speak. Emily jumped in quickly. "Oh, we had a quiet one this year. Just us. Simple." Her laugh was tight, her shoulders stiff. I watched her. The mask cracked just slightly. I could see the tension in her jaw. She was waiting for me to say something. Anything. For a while I let silence do the work. But then the moment arrived. A cousin's wife smiled at me. "You must be proud of Emily. She's always said you pushed her to finish school." Emily froze. Her smile faltered. Her eyes flicked toward me, sharp warning. I set my plate down. My voice was calm. "Yes, I worked overtime for 3 months to pay her tuition deposit. She wanted to quit halfway through, but I wouldn't let her. I told her she could do it, and she did." The words hung in the air. Simple, true. The cousin's wife nodded, impressed. "Oh, that's wonderful. A mother's sacrifice makes all the difference." Emily's face flushed. She tried to laugh, but it cracked. "Well, Mom always exaggerates." But her voice wavered. Her children were watching. Others leaned closer, curious. The silence stretched, filled with her discomfort. I didn't press further. I didn't need to. One truth was enough for tonight. I smiled faintly, picked up my plate again, moved to another corner of the room. Whispers began behind me. Not cruel whispers, just soft surprise. I didn't know she did that. 3 months of overtime. That must have been hard. Emily's voice tried to rise above them. She changed the subject, pulled her children close, laughed too loudly, but the crack had already shown. I sipped my drink slowly, felt the warmth spread through me. Not from the alcohol, from the truth. For years I had kept silent, letting her version of the story stand. But tonight, I had spoken. One fact, one piece of proof, and it had landed harder than any receipt, any journal entry. I left early. The snow crunched under my boots. The night was quiet, but inside me a hum of power grew. At home, I opened my notebook, wrote carefully. Day 30. First strike. I spoke the truth. She could not stop me. I underlined the words 3 times. I looked toward the closet where the journals rested, where the tin box waited. I didn't need them yet. Not tonight. My voice alone had been enough. But the thought lingered. If one truth could shake her mask, how many more would it take before it shattered completely? I closed the notebook, turned off the lamp, sat in the darkness, smiling faintly. Emily thought she silenced me, but tonight proved otherwise. She had no idea how much louder the truth could get. It didn't take long. 2 days after the potluck, the phone rang again. This time I knew it wasn't about babysitting. It was about me. Emily's name lit up the screen. I answered. Hello? Her voice was tight-clipped. Why did you say that at the party? I stayed quiet for a beat. Then I said softly, say what you know what. Her words spilled fast, sharp. You told people you worked overtime for me. You made me look weak. I sat back in the chair. The tin box sat nearby, silent but heavy. I told the truth, I said. Her breath hissed through the line. The truth? You humiliated me. In front of my husband. In front of my friends. I smiled faintly, though she couldn't see. I never meant to humiliate you. I only meant to remind you. Her voice cracked higher. Remind me, you had no right. You're digging up things I don't want out there. I leaned forward. My voice was calm, steady. You told me I never helped. I only wanted to show that I did. Silence. Long, heavy silence. I imagined her face flushed red, her jaw tight, her hands gripping the phone too hard. Finally, she spat out, Stop it! Whatever game you think you're playing, stop. You won't win. I whispered, steady as stone. I'm not playing, Emily. You are. She gasped. Then the line went dead. I sat there, phone warm in my hand. The silence after her voice felt different this time. Not empty, not humiliating. It was victory. I set the phone down gently. The house was quiet again, but I felt alive. My chest rose and fell in a rhythm that steadied me. Her anger was proof that she was rattled, proof that my silence had shifted into something sharper. That night I wrote in my notebook, Day 32. She confronted me. She is afraid. I closed the notebook with care. The lamplight glowed across the pages of the journal stacked nearby. I didn't open them tonight. I didn't need to, because now I had something better. Her fear. I leaned back in the chair. My mind replayed her voice. The edge of panic, the crack under the anger. Emily was losing control. Not because I shouted, not because I begged, but because I spoke softly, because I refused to be erased. And for the first time I wondered how far I could push her before she broke completely. Rumors move faster than truth, but sometimes the truth is the rumor. It began small. A question at the grocery store. A woman I barely knew leaned on her cart. I didn't know you worked overtime to send Emily to school. She never mentioned that. Her tone wasn't cruel, just curious. But curiosity spreads. At the post office, another voice. I always thought Emily was so independent, but people say you carried her through. I nodded, said nothing. Silence did more than words. It left space for questions. Questions grow in silence. At church the next week I noticed the glances. Not pity now. Something sharper. People looked at Emily differently, noticing the stiffness in her smile, noticing the way she avoided me. Her husband shifted in the pew beside her. His eyes flicked to me, then back to her. I saw the doubt there. It was only a flicker, but it was enough. After service, an in-law approached me. Her tone was soft, hesitant. "Emily says you were never around, but I heard you worked nights when she was young. Is that true?" I didn't confirm. I didn't deny. I only smiled and walked away. By the end of the week, I could feel it everywhere, a hum in the air, people piecing stories together, little fragments, little truths, questions Emily could not silence. The children, too, kept asking. At school, they told their friends. My grandma worked so Mom could go to college. Kids repeat what they hear, and their voices are louder than any whisper. Emily called me one evening. Her voice was brittle. "You need to stop. Stop talking to people. Stop whatever you're doing." "I haven't said much," I answered. It was the truth. I hadn't needed to. She exhaled sharply. "They're asking me things I don't want to answer. Do you understand what you're doing to me?" I sat in silence. Let her words hang. Finally, I whispered, "I'm not doing it, Emily. The truth is..." The line went quiet. I could hear her breathing, ragged, uneven. Then she hung up. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. For years I had been her shield. I had covered her mistakes, softened her story. Now, by stepping aside, I was letting the truth breathe. And it was stronger than I ever imagined. That night, I opened my notebook, wrote Day 40. Rumors spread, questions grow. She is unraveling. I closed the book slowly, sat in the quiet. My chest felt lighter, not with joy, not with peace, but with release. Emily wanted me gone, but the world was beginning to see me again, not because I demanded it, but because the lies she built were too thin to hold, and I wasn't going to patch them for her anymore. The invitation came in March. Not a call, not a visit, just a folded card slipped into my mailbox. The handwriting was hers, sharp, tight, a little uneven like her hand shook as she wrote. Inside 3 words, "Join us, Easter." Nothing more. I stared at the card for a long time. The last time I had walked to her door, she had blocked me. She had told me I never helped. She had sent me away, and now she was inviting me back. Not warmly, not lovingly, but desperately. I could hear it in the silence of that card. She was cracking. The rumors, the questions, the whispers at church, the children's curiosity. It was all pressing on her. I held the card between my fingers. It would be easy to tear it, to throw it away, to ignore it. But that would be her victory. That would let her pretend she was the one shutting me out. No. This time I would walk through her door, not as a beggar, not as an outcast, but as a presence she could not erase. On Easter Sunday, I dressed with care, a soft blue dress, a silver brooch that had belonged to my mother. I curled my hair, applied lipstick, looked in the mirror and saw not weakness, but steadiness. The drive was quiet. Spring air smelled of damp earth and new beginnings. The closer I came to her house, the steadier I felt. When I parked outside, I saw the curtains twitch. She had been watching for me. I walked up the path slowly, each step measured, not rushing, not timid, balanced. The door opened before I knocked. Emily stood there. Her smile was forced tight around the edges. "Mom," she said softly. Her eyes flicked past me toward the neighbors' houses. She didn't want an audience. I stepped inside. The air smelled of ham, cinnamon, and polish. Candles flickered on the table. Her in-laws sat stiffly in the living room. Her children rushed forward. Grandma. Their arms wrapped around me. Warm, tight, genuine. I smiled down at them, held them close, felt Emily's eyes burning into me. I straightened slowly, met her gaze, said nothing, because silence was still my sharpest weapon. Through dinner, conversation flowed awkwardly. Her husband tried to bridge gaps, asking about my garden, about the weather. Her in-laws spoke politely but carefully. Everyone felt the tension like a string pulled too tight. Emily laughed too loud. She served dishes with quick movements. Her smile cracked at the edges. I didn't challenge her. I didn't need to. My presence alone unsettled her. The children sat beside me, asking small questions. "Grandma, will you come to our play at school? Grandma, can we visit your house soon?" Emily shifted in her chair, uncomfortable. I answered softly, "We'll see. I'd like that." By dessert, The silence weighed heavy. Not mine this time. Hers. Every time a relative glanced between us, she felt it. Every time the children clung to me, she saw it. Every time I smiled calmly, she lost ground. When the meal ended, I stood, gathered my coat. The children begged me to stay. I kissed their cheeks, promising another visit. Emily followed me to the door. Her voice was low, sharp. "This doesn't mean anything." I looked at her evenly. "It means everything." Her face tightened, her lips pressed thin, but she said nothing more. I stepped outside. Spring air washed over me. The sky was pale blue, the world bright. I walked back to my car, steady, not broken. For the first time in years, I felt whole. At home, I opened my notebook. Wrote Day 90, Easter. She invited me back. Not because she wanted me, because she had to. My presence is the truth she cannot erase. I closed the notebook slowly. The tin box sat in the closet. The journals rested in the drawer. I hadn't needed them. Not yet. Silence and presence were stronger than paper. But I knew the final moment was coming. The moment where truth would stand in the open, undeniable, and I would be ready. The table was full, plates scraped, forks clinked, candles flickered. I sat near the end, the place that once belonged to me on Christmas Eve. Now I was inside, not outside. The children beside me giggled between bites of ham. Their laughter cut through the stiffness of the adults. Emily sat across the table, her smile strained, her laugh too sharp, too quick. Every glance toward me was a dart she couldn't throw. Her husband tried to keep conversation moving. Weather, sports, upcoming school events. But the tension wrapped tight around every word. The children spoke freely, though. They didn't sense the invisible string pulling us apart, or maybe they did, and they pulled on it. Between bites, one of them turned to Emily. "Mom, why wasn't Grandma at Christmas?" The room went still. Even the candles seemed to pause. Emily's face froze. Her fork hovered. She laughed thin and brittle. "Oh, honey, Grandma was busy that night." The other child shook their head. "No, you said she didn't help. You said that's why she couldn't come." Silence. Pure. Heavy. Every adult at the table looked at Emily. Her husband, her in-laws, even the cousins. All eyes on her. Her face flushed deep red. She stammered, "That's not what I mean, you misunderstood." The children blinked innocently. "But Grandma did help. She told us she paid for school. She was always there. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. I only sat still, hands folded, eyes calm." Emily's voice faltered. Her words tripped over themselves, half sentences broken excuses. No one rescued her, not this time. Her husband leaned back slowly. His eyes moved between me and her. The doubt was clear now. Not just doubt, recognition. The silence stretched until even Emily gave up. Her shoulders slumped, her smile collapsed, her head dropped. I reached for my glass of water, took a slow sip. The cool liquid steadied me. The moment was mine. I turned to the children and smiled gently. "I'm here now. That's what matters." Their faces lit up. They grinned wide, wrapped their arms around me where I sat. The table was still heavy, but something had shifted. The truth had slipped out. Not from me, from them, from innocence. Emily pushed her plate away, her appetite gone, her silence louder than any accusation. I stayed calm. I stayed steady, because silence had been my weapon, and now it was hers. She had nothing left to say. When dinner ended, I stood slowly. The children begged me not to go. I promised another visit, another meal, another moment. At the door, Emily followed me. Her voice was low, almost broken. "You think you've won." I turned to her, met her eyes. I didn't need to win. The truth did. Her mouth opened then shut, her lips pressed tight. Her eyes glistened, but she held back tears. I stepped out into the spring air. The sky was fading to dusk. Birds sang in the trees. Life went on. I walked to my car with my head high, not heavy, not bowed, high. At home, I sat at the table, opened my notebook, wrote carefully, Day 120. The children asked at Easter. The truth spoke for me. I didn't need the journals. I didn't need the box. I only needed silence. And silence won. I set the pen down, closed the notebook. The room was quiet. But this silence was different from the one on Christmas Eve. Then it had been hollow, cold, cutting. Now it was warm, full, final. I leaned back, closed my eyes, exhaled slowly. The story was over. Not because I forced it, because the truth had written itself, and Emily would carry it now, not me.